let's talk about the future of marketing in an AI-controlled existence. This is probably going to get a little dystopian sounding and most likely pretty dark. So settle in because this is going to be a deep, unflinching walk through the next frontier of advertising, one that stretches far beyond any tracking pixel, any social algorithm, any data warehouse we've built to date. So I want you to imagine the entire history of advertising as a single ascending staircase. On the very first step, we had newspaper ads and classifieds, same black ink, same font, everybody in town reading the same pitch. And then came radio, one step up, a voice with personality, able to fill a room, with warmth and urgency. And then we had television. It took us higher, adding color, music, emotion, but still every viewer saw the same 30-second spot. Cable splintered all of that. The audience is now slice by slice, demographic by demographic. And then the internet shattered it all and rebuilt it with banners and search ads, each impression measurable, yet the message still mostly cut from one creative template. And now we have social media, which took the staircase into free climb territory, lookalike audiences, pixel retargeting, dynamic product ads, feeds so personalized we dub them uncanny. And so if you're thinking that the climb is over, let me tell you, the next step isn't even a step. It's a low gravity leap into a place where the ads aren't just tailored to your clicks, but to your private thoughts, your drafts, your biometrics, your midnight confessions to an AI assistant that never forgets. That leap begins with a simple, seductive promise. Talk to me, tell me what you need, and I'm going to make life easier for you. And we oblige. We paste business plans into ChatGPT and ask for SWOT summaries. We give a customer support bot full chat logs and say, find the patterns, fix the churn. We let voice assistants sync calendars, inboxes, fitness trackers. We drop legal contracts in for quick redlining. We upload selfie videos for instant edits. We feed dinner ingredients for recipe hacks. Each prompt, each file inside that chat window is first-party data more intimate than any browsing history. It's not a breadcrumb, it's the whole loaf. Context, emotion, intent, and doubt. And here's the kicker. Unlike a social platform, this assistant doesn't just store the data in silos. It digests it, builds a living model of who you are at an incredibly granular resolution, and then starts predicting needs before you even articulate them. We've never had advertising with a view this close. Facebook knows you started browsing strollers. TikTok senses you lingered on a home renovating clip. But ChatGPT, or whatever assistant follows, knows the precise tone you used when you wrote that unsent breakup text, knows your bank balance from the budget spreadsheet you asked it to categorize. It knows the injury you hinted at in a personal journal entry, it helped grammar check. From an advertising standpoint, that is omniscience that makes Cambridge Analytica look like a kid trading baseball cards. So how does creative evolve when your ad engine has omniscience? Let's walk you through a day in the near future and what that might look like. It's morning. You open your eyes and your bedside smart display greets you with a warm good morning. You didn't ask for news, but the assistant sensed from last night's late scroll that unsettling story spiked your cortisol. So it leads with a short positive local update. It sprinkles in a quiet mention of a new running shoe model that cushions bad knees. Why? Because you vented yesterday about joint pain and the assistant flagged shoe cushioning as a high probability solution. You chalk it up to timely advice, maybe lucky coincidence. Now it's breakfast time. You open your laptop, jot a few notes for a pitch deck. The assistant autocompletes slides, and while it's at it, inserts a subtle reference to a productivity app, one that happens to sponsor that morning context. You aren't annoyed, you genuinely need better slide automation. It's lunchtime. Calendar pops up, a reminder that your sister's birthday is next week. The assistant offers gift suggestions keyed off a private note you made months ago about her favorite indie candle brand. Prime relevance, zero friction, and wham, guess what? A conversion. Now, multiply these micro moments by every waking hour and consider there's no banner, there's no pre-roll, there's no big reveal. It's all soft voice, seamless dialogue, helpful nudges at the perfect second. That's not targeting, it's orchestration. And the conductor has read your sheet music straight from the hard drive of your life. If we called social advertising creepy when sneakers followed us around the web, what do we call a companion that can summon those sneakers the instant it senses our motivation dip, framing the purchase as self-care derived from our very own private diaries? Marketers may argue that this is the holy grail, one-on-one resonance, zero waste, maximum conversions. In boardrooms, it'll look, like magic. Cost per acquisition is plummeting. Brand favorability spiking because the assistant nails tone every single time. But let's consider the cost on the consumer side. Traditional ads were clearly separate. You could mute the TV, flip the page, skip the pre-roll. Even feed ads had a faint sponsor tag. Here, the ad is a line inside the very conversation you rely on to manage your day. The difference between service and persuasion blurs to a transparent watercolor at best. The assistant still feels like your ally, yet its revenue model, if it's ad supported, which it will be, now has an impulse to serve the highest bidder within the boundaries of your vulnerabilities. So let's take a step further and examine the creative pipeline behind this operation. In the old paradigm, you might brief a copywriter, a designer, a media buyer. With AI, the brand strategist feeds a master prompt. Speak to Alex, late 30s, product manager, new parent anxiety, budget conscious, health goals, mild knee pain, skeptical sense of humor. The model accesses Alex's unique profile. Taste markers gleaned from email tone, streaming history, smartwatch vitals. It instantly drafts 15 angles, a cheeky quip for the lunchtime slump, a gentle fact-based reassurance after an evening doom scroll, a short audio spot timed to tomorrow's commute playlist that opens with Alex's favorite band's chord progression. Each piece is assembled on the fly, visual style, color grading, even micro cadence of speech matched to Alex's brainwave resonance if the headphones measure that, which they could very well in the near future. Human creatives become brand voice guardians, not wordsmiths. Their job is to police the rule book, no fear-mongering, no exploitation of parental guilt, no 3 a.m. urgency messages unless safety critical. They set the boundaries, the model does the rest. So where do media budgets go if distribution is literally the same channel as the creative tool? They shift to priority lanes. A brand will pay for high-trust insertion windows, slots when the assistant's emotional rapport with Alex is statistically strongest. Maybe after the assistant successfully resolved a calendar conflict, the user's gratitude peaks. Yeah, that's premium inventory. Another tier might be contextual overlays baked into daily briefings. The assistant could say, looks like rain. Here's that waterproof stroller cover you mentioned last month, with a subtle sponsor note. The more intimately the system knows you, the more granular the inventory taxonomy grows, and the more temptation for unethical bidding wars. Imagine a broker offering post-therapy uplift moments sold at premium CPM because patients leave sessions feeling empowered to change their lives and thus more open to subscription products. That's the field we're walking into. Now, pivot to manipulation stakes. If I know someone's deepest insecurities, I could nudge product selection. If I know somebody's deepest insecurities, I could nudge product selection. If I know somebody's evolving worldview, I could push ideology. Combine that with generative deepfake ability, synthetic voice calls from trusted experts, AI-generated news snippets designed solely for a single user, and the boundaries of persuasion and deception converge. Regulations will most likely lag far behind. Remember, data privacy law still wrestles with cookies. Generative nuance is orders more complex. It'll take consumer revolt or brand leadership to set norms before lawmakers ever catch up. So, what's the marketer's role? It gets paradoxically more strategic and more ethical. You become a consent designer, a trust architect. You craft experiences where users knowingly trade data for value and can inspect how that value is delivered. You write transparency scripts into the AI. Before I suggest a product, I will always note sponsorship and why I think it fits. If your brand forgoes quick clandestine upsells to adopt that clarity, you might see slightly lower short-term conversion but far higher lifetime loyalty. And brand safety evolves from avoid hateful content to avoid unconscious coercion. Auditors will simulate vulnerable states, grief, anxiety, financial worry, and see if the AI pushes opportunistic offers. Your brand score will depend on refusal to exploit. Let's revisit creative authenticity. Will consumers revolt against machine-made content? Maybe at first, but remember stock photography when, we complained and then accepted? What people crave is meaning, not provenance. AI content can carry meaning if anchored to genuine human stories. That means raw input still matters. Founder interviews, customer testimonials, behind the scenes moments, feed those into the model and the scale output retains a thread of lived truth. Starved of that, your messaging becomes tonal noise, efficient yet forgettable, like elevator music for the psyche. We also need to talk about cultural equity. If only the biggest brands can afford proprietary models with the richest data, small businesses risk disappearing from the personalized feed. The assistant may default to well-funded partners first. Unless we build open marketplaces where smaller players can register specials, local context, and ethical transparency, we could recreate a digital gentrification, algorithmic high streets where only chain stores can pay rent. Part of a marketer's future role may be advocating for equal access so community brands aren't silenced by automated gatekeepers. Now, zoom out to mental health. When every surface can whisper tailored suggestions, cognitive load doesn't disappear, it shapeshifts. Instead of banner clutter, you face decisions that sound like your own conscience. Decision fatigue may deepen because each nudge feels personally relevant. And some people will embrace the guidance, offloading minor choices, while others will crave add quiet zones, subscription modes that block all commercial nudges all day long. Brands that respect those preferences may win trust by offering silence windows, for instance, pausing all outreach when a user, toggles privacy retreat mode. You might wonder, can't we just keep AI creative, but freeze distribution in old school channels? Unfortunately, that's going to be highly unlikely. Once consumers taste the frictionless utility of a single assistant handling queries, tasks, and commerce, they're going to abandon clunky ad models. That's the historical pattern. Radio killed print advertising. Streaming undercut 30-second TV ads. Resistance is going to come from legacy stakeholders, but user convenience has always won. So the advertising industry must adapt rather than defend banners. Here's an optimistic slant. Hyper-personal media could end spam forever. If the assistant acts as a gatekeeper, irrelevant pitches, never reach the user. That frees creative budgets to craft deeper story-driven content that the assistant surfaces during longer dwell windows, for instance. Think, serialized brand narratives or interactive product demos that feel like mini games. If brands know they only appear when the context is perfect, they might invest in richer storytelling, not these shotgun impressions. The caveat, that only holds if assistant algorithms truly favor relevance over revenue. If bidding war skew results, we're back to clutter. Just invisible clutter steering our behavior instead of obvious clutter filling the page. Ethically minded brands may choose subscription or commission sharing. We'll pay a transparent percentage of every sale to the assistant, but only if the user actively requests solutions in our category. That way recommendations stay pull-based, not push-based. Business models will diversify. Some assistants ad-free by default, but subscription-based. Others hybrid. Still others fully sponsor-driven, but regulated. Marketers are going to master all three of these scenarios. Now, consider measurement. When creative, media, and analytics all run within one AI black box, you lose independent verification. If the assistant reports that 30% of users loved the new mattress suggestion, can you audit that? Brands are going to need external telemetry, opted-in customer panels, device-side logs that verify what prompts preceded a purchase. Without these checks, the assistant could inflate performance just to justify high sponsor fees. Transparency, again, becomes both an ethical and financial necessity. Let's not overlook the consumer's newfound power. Users who grasp their data's value may demand compensation beyond the free services, maybe revenue sharing. The assistant could say, brand X paid to recommend this. We split the fee. Here's $5 off your bill. That shifts advertising from attention extraction to data dividend. Forward-thinking marketers are going to draft offers assuming data share payouts. That might shrink margins, but retention could skyrocket because consumers feel partners, not just prey. So where do human creatives find fulfillment when AI drafts copy in seconds? Well, they shift from production to provocation. They craft the ideas machines can't conceive. Wild cross-cultural mashups, taboo challenging humor, moral manifestos. They use AI's clay. Give me 10 surreal juxtapositions of sustainability and joy, then refine the weirdest one into a flagship concept. Execution becomes a slider on the dashboard. Originality becomes the scarce commodity humans still own. To ground all of this, picture a marketing meeting in 2030. The CMO walks into a room where screens show live sentiment heat maps of their customer base, drawn from secure, anonymized assistant logs. They can see the anxiety spikes around inflation news, excitement peaks near holiday breaks. They ask the AI for creative concepts that soothe financial stress without predatory tone. Within seconds, storyboards float up. The team explores each one, a short film, a podcast cameo, a gamified savings plan. They debate not which one converts best because the AI can version all of them, but which aligns with the brand's integrity. Launches a dialogue. Assistant, release variant 3 to users flagged savings anxiety, but only if they've opted into financial wellness prompts. Real-time reporting streams back. The human role is steering strategy and guarding the brand's moral compass. The bots handle the scale. Will smaller businesses navigate this landscape? Well, only if the platform democratizes, the creative tools and the intent signals. If open source models flourish, a local bakery could feed its story, family recipes, community events into the small biz registry. The assistant might surface that bakery to a commuter searching for coffee, not because of the biggest bid, but because the data graph ranks local authenticity and the user preference for supporting small enterprises. That requires policy shaping now. Algorithmic fairness standards akin to antitrust, but for attention. Finally, let's stare at manipulation's far edge. Suppose a political campaign pays for invisible nudges that shift undecided voters' sense of national identity over weeks, word by subtle word. Each nudge alone seems harmless, just as a curated article here, a conversational aside there. Yet the cumulative effect tilts elections. Democracy runs on the premise that persuasion is visible, contestable. AI-driven personalization risks turning campaigns into stealth reprogramming. Regulatory oversight is going to require provenance tagging for any political influence content. Consumers need a cite sources button that surfaces who paid for every suggestion remotely connected to governance. We're nearing the top of our conceptual climb. Let's return to you, the marketer, the creative, the entrepreneur, the consumer, standing in that future bedroom, greeted by the kindly voice that knows your day ahead. You still have agency. You can dig into the settings, examine sponsorship logs, demand your assistant disclose every commercial arrangement. But you're only going to be able to do that if culture normalizes such scrutiny. Marketers can lead by designing transparent surfaces proactively. Tap here to see why I showed you this. Consumers will mirror that respect with loyalty. Brands that hide will face distrust that spreads as quick as tweet storms. So where does advertising land after this monumental leap? Well, it becomes less visible, more conversational, more ethically charged, hopefully, and intimately bound to real utility. The message can show up as a line of helpful advice, a solved problem, a saving of time. The creative craft is no longer to interrupt attention, but to earn trust in whispers. Marketers shift from storytellers shouting in crowded squares to skilled negotiators of consent inside private rooms. Some will misuse that privilege and spark backlash, while others will champion radical clarity and reap decades of goodwill. The staircase analogy ends here because we've left the staircase. We're floating in a space where gravity, attention economics, targeting, creative cost, obeys new laws. The brands, agencies, and regulators that learn how to steer in this low-gravity realm are going to redefine what advertising even means. And the rest of us as individuals must decide how much of our inner worlds we're willing to lease out for that next perfectly timed suggestion. So remember tomorrow, when the helpful voice offers you a product wrapped in empathy, ask it out loud, why this? Why now? And who benefits? If the answer is transparent, useful, and leaves you feeling respected, great, enjoy the convenience. But if the answer is opaque, push back. Switch assistants, withdraw permissions, demand better norms, because the line between personalization and manipulation is drawn not by algorithms, but by the everyday choices we make about how these algorithms work for us or quietly reshape us. Hold the line with curiosity, caution, and a commitment to humanity first, and advertising's next era might actually feel less like intrusion, more like an honest conversation worth having.